the other thing.
Why does it say that it's better to tie a millstone around your neck and be thrown into the depths of the sea than to mess with one of his kids?
I don't, and then people still do it. I don't know. Welcome back to the Motherhood Collective Co. I will cut some of that out. I sure
Please
will.
don't.
We had a topic request on Instagram and about toddlers, and I just had the thought, we haven't talked about toddlers in a really long time. Although my toddler's not even a toddler anymore. The last time we had a topic,
I know, I didn't realize that.
But Lily is a toddler now.
So 4 is not a toddler?
4 is considered a preschooler.
That's so sad.
I think the sadder part is that Lily is a toddler at 1 year old.
Okay, yeah.
Like 1 should not be a toddler.
No, 1
That's
is
just
a baby.
2 is a toddler.
I feel like you're a baby till you're like 18 months old.
I know.
And even then, when I watch videos of Sunny and she was like 2, I'm like, you're a baby.
It's just a tiny little nugget.
I feel like they're a baby till they're like 2.5, 3.
Yeah, well, they're a toddler at 1 to 4. And they should be a toddler till
they're 5.
Yeah, nope. So, yeah, we're going to talk about handling our toddlers and big kids, because Noah is a preschooler, but obviously he still has big emotions, which I think happens until through the teen years. Shoot, I was like almost 30
I have
before
big emotions.
Yeah, I know. So let's just talk about how to handle those.
Yeah.
And this is a topic I'm intensely passionate about, because this is when my self-awakening happened. When Noah turned 18 months or whatever it was, when he started testing my boundaries, I realized I had a lot of work to do on myself, because I had a lot of triggers because of the way I was raised. And I would also like to preface, before I even talk about this topic, was that when I talk about my childhood, I just want to make it clear that my parents were good parents, and just because my mom didn't remove all of the generational trauma in our family doesn't mean she didn't remove some of it. And I'm very proud of her for that. And so I hate when I talk about stuff like this. And I'm like, and the trauma. No, nobody has. I don't think anybody in my family actually listens to this. Yeah. But my mom has recently stopped drinking and started going to church. And I feel like our relationship has healed a lot in the last 6 months. And I don't know. I just feel
the need to clarify.
Feel the need to clarify it. Okay. So I will say the best news about your toddler's big emotions is that this entire episode is not about your child's emotions. It's about reparenting yourself and getting control of your own emotions. So the good news is the responsibility is on you, and it has nothing to do with your kid. So let's give you some tactics and ways you can calm yourself down and help them learn and understand their emotions. Yeah. Because that's really what it is.
Yeah.
What do you think? Any thoughts before I just talk this whole time?
I just think that there's a grandiose misconception about different parenting tactics and styles, and we get so hung up on the symbolism and the labels that we want to be categorized into some kind of specific thing, so that you're just seen that way. I had a neighbor come up to me the other day, and in our new neighborhood, and she was so sweet talking to me, whatever, but then she made it very clear that she was a free range style parent. I don't pretend to know much about what that means, aside from that show that I watched about all the different parenting styles, and I can't think of the name of it right now, but it was really interesting. And they kind of put all these different parenting styles to the test to kind of see which one held, the best over time. With that being said, I really will not share any specific title over my parenting style, because I really just feel like it comes from the Lord and his guidance and his wisdom bestowed onto me as Sunny's mom and Ledger's mom. And then also with that, I just feel like there's parenting styles that drive me nuts, to be honest with you.
Well, first things first, I think that when you put yourself into a box with parenting, you're doing a serious disservice to your children. Yeah. Because children are not one size fits all. The same thing that worked for Noah is not going to work for Lily. And they're in the same household. So, the kid down the street, me and my friends' kids, we should not be parenting the same, those children the same, because they're not the same. So immediately before you do anything else, just remove the label of parenthood you've chosen for yourself because it should not exist. Gentle parenting, authoritative parenting, free range parenting, conscious parenting, whatever it is, remove it. You're parenting. I'm parenting Noah.
Yeah.
That's really what it needs to be. And I feel like when you put a label on yourself, you, one, compare yourself to everybody else who's doing that online. And two, you're limiting the resources you have in your parenting.
Yeah.
And who told you had to parent like that?
I know. And I feel like where you're probably starting from is a base on which you were parented yourself. So that's your starting place, regardless of how many books you read, how many podcasts you listened to, how much education you put into it. Your natural bend to parenting your child is going to be how you were parented, because that's how you were shown,
or the opposite
these
of
things,
how you were parented.
or the blatant opposite for sure. But when we're talking about like knee-jerk reaction, you start seeing a certain behavior in your kid, words come out of your mouth that were spoken to you when you were younger, whether they were good, bad, whatever. It's like very much you have to like consciously break out of those things if you want to do something differently than what was done for you.
There's
so
just
many thoughts.
And there's not, when you question your box, also think about like who's telling you need to parent that way. And also because like there is no rule. There's no rule for bedtime. There's no rule for car rides. There's no rule for naps. There's no rule for school. There is not like there's just not one size fits all. So I think some of the frustration in parenthood in general, for whatever reason you have it in your head, my kid should be doing this or they shouldn't be doing this. Who told you that? Are you putting that pressure on yourself and your child because society told you they should be doing XYZ?
Yeah.
Or some rando on social is telling you they should be doing XYZ? Because if that's the reason, then we've got to deconstruct that immediately because every child is unique and their instructions are individual from the Lord. So deconstruct your box, I think would be like the first thing. So yeah.
And I just feel like, I don't know if this will sound judgmental. I hope it doesn't.
I like that intro.
With the knowledge that you're the only one who knows how to parent your kid, I feel like our generation does a really good job at being emotionally available and intuitive, being aware of generational trauma and wanting to
do a great job at that.
rid the next generation of that.
Yeah.
I think we do a really good job at recognizing the importance of emotions and the root of them, and seeing behaviors as the demonstration of something that's deeper rooted. We do those things really well. I think we've almost in our generation have swung so far onto that end of the pendulum that I think that there are most kids are not being parented in a way that's also like, but hey, there's like a way that like you are and are not allowed to behave.
Do you know, on one of our episodes, maybe it was a Q&A about punishment, and I was talking about how we made family rules and how the word stupid was like a big deal in our house. And I said, we sat down as a family, we wrote out, if we say stupid, we go into the schoolroom, and we had somebody respond on our Spotify, because if you're listening on Spotify, you can send us questions, you can send us comments.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And I filter them, so I decide if they get posted or not when I post the next week's episode. And I got this big long message about how I'm damaging my kid by putting him in timeout. Excuse me, because like I feel like you and I are very clear when we speak to this audience, to our group of mamas. We are very clear that our kids are different. They have individual needs, and we are confident that we are giving our children the best for them and what they need. And it's probably not going to be what's best for your child. And we don't judge you for that.
No.
Right? So,
but I do, I guess, to be straight up, I think I am judging as a whole children who are going completely undisciplined. Like, I think it's very clear that our generation, like, we're great at all those things that I just listed, but I think that we've almost gone so far the opposite direction, because I think a lot of us did have that more authoritarian style parenting. I actually personally didn't, but like I think in general that's probably the consensus amongst like the boomer generation. It was very authoritarian. It was very like, do this because I said so. It was very like obey and
my parents'
shut your mouth.
motto was do as I say, not as I do, because they all smoked and drank and
that
did
too.
all the things.
That was a motto from the boomer generation as well.
Yeah, my parents are Gen X, but yes.
Okay. And I just feel like there's that like intentionality of like, okay, now we want to be compassionate. We want to give hugs instead of spankings, and we want to do this instead of that. And I love that. Mm-hmm. But you also still need to correct your child, and you still need to discipline them, whatever that looks like. But correction and discipline need to come in the form of learning something, right? Yeah. Not like conjuring up fear in them, but it needs to happen regardless. Like I see these reels and stuff about like kind of mocking our generation when it comes to parenting, and their toddlers having a tantrum on the grocery store floor, and the mom like throws themselves on the ground and is like, I'm here with you in this emotion, and it's like, I just feel like I
think I know somebody who would do that.
There's a time and a place, where you're like, yes, if we are at home and you're having a hard day and you need me to be there and be present and all these things. But then there's also a boundary. And like, for me, I will just speak for myself. There's a standard for which we are going to behave to friends, to people that are older than you, that are trusted and that I care about. And there are certain things that like I am expecting. And I think the older Sunny gets, I think I get more and more, I don't want to say strict, but like I do want to train her up in the way that she should go. Yeah. And that means like taking those things seriously. So if you're like the mom throwing yourself on the floor in a grocery store and being like, it's okay to be whatever it is. I just feel like there needs to be a balance.
Have you finished The Danish Way of Parenting?
No.
Okay. I was just reading a little bit today. I've read that. This is my third time reading that book, and we're reading that, just so you know, we're reading that for book club right now. It is a very short read. I think on Audible it's only like 3 hours.
It's really short. That I almost saw how short it was, and I was like, oh, I can get through this in no time.
It is like so full of gold though. Anyways, a big thing she talks about, which we're going to talk about spanking a little bit later on, but she does talk about how like spanking's illegal in Denmark. You can't do it. So then she goes on to talk about some different parenting styles, and she says that she gives research for authoritative parenting, not authoritarian parenting. That is what you were describing earlier. Like, I just have these rules and I'm not telling you why. I'm not reassuring you. I'm not
and it's like
educating you. It's just
and like a power struggle.
But she says authoritative, because and she kind of prefaced it like, we don't spank in Denmark. That's illegal. Children are taught with a lot of treated with a lot of respect. She gives research about how children who have authority in their lives, not meaning like corporal punishment, are less likely to do drugs, are more likely to come to their parents when they mess up. And what else did she say? Are more likely to avoid peer pressure because they have a internal compass. They have more of an internal compass than somebody who never had any kind of discipline, any kind of boundaries, any kind of rules.
Absolutely.
Growing up. So I thought that was so interesting.
And I think sometimes we forget that children need boundaries to feel safe. So they actually are looking to you to tell them like, what am I allowed to do? What am I not allowed to do? Yeah. Because if they are left to their own devices, they feel insecure. And that's when you're going to actually see an uptick in tantrums, because their little brain is on fire and no one's helping them guide or direct them in their ways. And so, operating in a means of like, I'm going to say what I mean and mean what I say. I think that's one of the biggest things that I've implemented with Sunny. I'm going to say what I mean, and I'm going to mean what I say. And that means my yeses are yeses, my no's are no's, and you can expect me to follow through on my word. And I think that can be really hard, but it also sets you up for really having a trusting relationship. I think that I see a lot of times like, okay, hypothetically, there's this situation. It was really happened, but there's a kid on a play date whacking another kid with a stick. The mom of the kid with the stick says, if you do that again, I'm going to take the stick away. And he keeps doing it. And the stick never gets taken away. And she about 10 different times says, I will take that stick away if that happens again.
Yeah.
her kid looks at her like, you don't mean anything you say. Yeah. I am free to do whatever I want. Like, if you don't do the hard thing and mean what you say, even when it's like wildly inconvenient, I just think eventually your kid gets to the point where they're like, well, you don't mean what you say. So, and that could be like good things too. Like, oh, we're going to go to a movie tonight or this, you know, and then it's like, you don't, or you just don't feel like it anymore. And then it's like,
I agree.
You know,
and that's like a big thing for me too. And I was also putting thought into this. And I think that since I've become a parent, I've understood the Lord so much more because we're the exact same way. We are literally children. If you look at an eternal perspective, right? We pass from this earth and our spirit moves on to eternity, right? We are literally tiny baby children on this earth right now. This is a blip of time and we are here to learn, and God is overseeing us. He didn't just set us on the earth and let us run wild and free because we would have failed copiously. He gives us the covenant or the commandments. He tells us what we should and should not be doing. And those rules, while people who are outside of religion often say like, gosh, you have to do that. Why? Or why is sex before marriage a bad thing? It's like, your body's natural. You should be, you know what, whatever it is. They kind of attack us for the way we live our lives. And something that I've learned is that those things do not hold me back. Those things give me so much freedom. Because they give me
and they are solely rooted in your protection.
Exactly. And parenthood is, us parenting our children is literally the exact same thing that the Lord is doing for us. We are doing for our children. We're giving them boundaries. No, you can't touch the stove. You're going to burn your hand. Yeah. No, you can't. Whatever it is for their protection. And we're training them up to be good human beings who will live good lives because we have taught them the ins and outs of being a human in this fallen world. So
I agree.
Rules need to be set.
I agree. And I just feel like there's like such a like precious dance between all of the things where it's like your kid's having a hard time going to bed. And then, they're saying they're having a hard time because they're afraid of the dark or they had a hard day, and you're sitting there and you're processing all those things, and maybe they're not calming down or they're still up, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Like, you can sit there and you can like love them and coax them and pray for them and all these things. And eventually you're going to have to say, babe, it's really time to go to bed. Yeah. Right? Like it's time to go to bed. You're safe. You're loved. Yeah. And I want you, what I always tell Sunny is like, you need to just say your prayers and you're going to fall asleep. You're going to have a good sleep. But like, it's that dance. Yeah. Like, I'm going to be there for you. I'm going to soothe you. I'm going to be your safe place. And I'm also going to be like, okay, now
here's the boundary.
Yeah, we're going, and I think that there's just like sometimes a missing piece one way or the other where, we're too quick and we're too strict to be like, okay, let's get it together, which I can tend to be sometimes with Sunny, because I was thinking about this the other day and I know I posted about it, but because she's so mature, because she's so tall, because she's so big and she's advanced in her language and she's a very good listener, I honestly forget that she's 3 years old. And so when she has a day that she's acting like a 3-year-old instead of her normal like 6-year-old self, I can find myself being like slow to be patient with her. And like, I just felt like the Lord's like so humbled me the other day, because I was just having this day where I was like, okay, we got to do this. And she was just like clearly having a hard time. And I just like caught this glimpse of her. I was cleaning her bathroom and I caught this glimpse of her, and she had just gotten out of the shower and she's wearing her little t-shirt and she's playing with her dolls in the middle of her bedroom. And I was like, you're a baby.
It's hard to see at first
figuring
that way.
This out. Like, you're holding your new baby after you have this toddler, and like, you're like, well, you're not a baby. Like, and so much more than this baby does. And, I was just like brought to my knees and I just like hugged her on the floor, and nothing horrible had happened. I just felt the weight of me being like, hey, you should know what to do by now. So do it, you know, high expectations for sure. Yeah. And it just really humbled me really quickly.
Yeah. And I'm okay. So this is all fun and games talking about our 3 and 4-year-old, but I have Lily. Okay. Who is now 1, who now, and it is the cutest thing I've ever seen in the world, she will get mad. Noah will take something from her. I'm not picking her up fast enough or whatever it is. And she sits down on her butt, so dramatic. And she looks behind her and she slowly goes backwards to lay on the floor.
Gosh, Sunny did that too when she was little.
She spread eagles, and then she decides, okay, now it's the time. and lets loose and just wails. And I was telling Jesse this earlier that I feel like these phrases that are so ingrained in me are just like starting to come out that I haven't had to use in a long time. Because when your child starts, like their brain development can like actually comprehend that they're not getting what they want, right? That you two are two separate people. You have two separate goals, because that's what's happening around 1 to 18 months. They know that you have two separate goals at a certain task, and that their goal is not your goal, and they're mad. And they don't have the cognitive ability to understand, one, that they're mad. They just think this is the worst thing in the world. I'm used to getting everything I want. If I'm hungry, I get milk. If I want to sleep, I go to sleep. If I need to poop, I poop in my pants. Like there is zero like wait time for satisfaction for babies. But into toddlerhood, that changes. And now they don't know what's going on. And everything is so big to them. So I've been thinking about this all, because like my biggest phrase that I've been using in the last couple of days is like, oh, you're really mad right now. And at this stage, because later on, you know, your tactics do change when you're trying to teach your kids their emotions, because the first thing you have to do is teach them what their emotions are, and then you teach them that they're okay. And then you move on to teaching them how to handle them. So right now at a year old, I'm just telling Lily that she's mad.
Yeah.
I'm like getting down on her level. I'm looking at her in the face to let her know that I'm there. And I'm just like trying to calm her down. If she needs picked up, I'm picking her up. If she needs me to rub her back, I'm rubbing her back. If she, you know, I don't know, whatever it is, I'm just calming her down. But I will never forget. And this story like plays in my mind a lot ever since I've had Noah, was my parents, and they tell this story like they're so proud of it. I love you guys, and you're not listening to this, but I remember them telling me when I was 18 months old, I ran out into the middle of the road and a car had come and I scared them. So, and they'd say, oh, we beat the crap out of you. And they just thought it was so funny. And you never did it again. That's horrible. That is horrible. That makes me feel so sad. So when your kids are triggering you, I think the very first thing that you need to do is you need to recognize, oh, I'm being triggered right now.
Yeah.
There's a reason for it. Like my biggest trigger when Noah was a toddler was bedtime. Hands down, I would be at bedtime sobbing. And I have the thing where if I'm mad, I need like I need to feel something. So just digging my nails into my hands, digging my nails into my arms, like so mad. Right. And I wasn't acting on it. And that's one of the things that kind of pushed me into therapy, because I was like scared, like why this baby who's just being a baby is crying, because that's what babies do. He doesn't want to go to bed. He wants me to be with him. Why am I like so physically freaking angry that my kid won't go to sleep? And I was just talking to a friend about this earlier in the week, and she started crying because she was like, I think that was the first time she heard someone else say that, and it just validated that for her. But then I started going to therapy, and that was kind of one of the first things we worked on outside of like my sexual abuse and PTSD, was kind of labeling my own emotions and labeling my own triggers. And bedtime was so hard for me because I was hit a lot at bedtime. If I didn't just get to bed, just turn my brain off and lay the heck down, then it was like, okay, I'll give you 5 minutes. I'm coming in with a paddle. And like that just happened my entire childhood. So and that would happen if my sister was awake, we shared a room, we would both get hit. You know what I mean? So it's like, my therapist was like, of course bedtime feels scary for you. It's hard for you because your body doesn't feel safe when your kid isn't going to bed right now. Do you know what I mean? So that's understanding your own emotions is something that you've really got to work on, so that you can then calm yourself down, find whatever anchors you into reality, because you being unsafe because your kid's not going to bed is not reality. Yeah. Right. And I was also telling my friend this, like, eventually it stops becoming a struggle and it starts becoming like a skill. Like, I'm not saying that when Noah doesn't go to bed, I don't start having a cortisol raise in my body, that it doesn't trigger me. But now I know what to do. I know to calm myself down. I know how to breathe. I know, like, I just have the skill to not physically become angry. Does that make sense? So your toddler's behavior, because they're 2, they're 3 years, you know, their whole job is to figure out where their box is. they need boundaries and they're trying to find them. And the way they find them is by pushing your boundaries to see where's the wall, right? And the best thing you can do for that is to figure out when you're triggered. Just get curious. Don't get hard on yourself. Don't get all guilty. Like, just get curious. Why am I feeling so angry that my kid is doing what all kids are doing? Because honestly, that will help so much. And then you can go from there. And we can talk about that too, like where to go from there. But once you kind of label that in yourself.
Yeah, I think so too. I think you're the only one who's going to know why your child will trigger you. And I will say will, because they will.
Oh yeah. That's their whole job.
Yeah. And why they will, because it could even be like you see yourself in them in certain ways that like you see an innocence in them. And then it just like you hold this tension of like, well, that you know that's going to get taken away someday by some mean girl or some awful, situation, whatever it is. And there's like a, try to get to the root of like, what do I need right now? What am I trying? What's my mind and my body and my soul and my spirit trying to communicate to me right now? Is it something that I can actually do something with, or is it something outside of my control? Like walking down that path of asking those questions. I feel like most of the time when I get into like some kind of like flustered mode of things, it's always like some kind of moment that like stops me in my tracks. Like Sunny will just say something like so precious or like kind or something that I'm just like, yeah, what am I doing right now? Like, why does all this other stuff matter? I actually, side note, I was just thinking about this and it was like so sad. My friend was telling me about this girl that she went to college with, and she just lost her 3-year-old to I'm getting 2 stories mixed up. The girl that she knew that lost her 3-year-old, separate thing. I won't even get into that. It's so sad and horrible. This other woman, this was just a story that she read online of a woman who lost her little boy to like, he was riding one of those little bikes or those little cars on their property, like the little trucks that they can drive like themselves. A ride on, yeah, like Sunny and Noah probably both have. And there was some kind of like little creek, but it had rained a lot, so it was like a kind of more rushing than normal. And she had just told him like, you can't go over there right now because it's just like a little bit much. And normally he could like drive over it with his car, but she told him not to. And she said she went inside to do dishes, and I mean, long story short, he ended up passing away because he did get swept away and they couldn't find him. And she had this moment of like what she recounted as like literally what in the world was more important in that moment. Like, why did I go inside? Probably to do the dishes, probably to do something, like she's like beating herself up over it, which is awful. And I've just been thinking about that all week since my friend told me. But I think like sometimes, and I know not everybody's brains work this way, and I don't want you to try to force your brain to work this way if it doesn't. But I've talked a lot about this on the podcast of like, I feel like my brain works a lot in the realm of like my future self and regret and little moments like that, like popping into my brain about like, I'll hear that, like, what in the world is more important right now than like connection with your child or slowing down? Because I will say one of the triggers that I have is I feel like I have all these things I need to do, and I expect my kids to just be fine while I do all of those things. So if they're having a day where they're not fine, or maybe they're like, Sunny's hungrier than normal and asks for like multiple meals, or she just wants me to play with her, or Ledger needs me to hold him for his naps instead of put him down or whatever, I find myself getting this like, why can't I just do the things I need to do? And that's when I get like snippy. And so there's moments like that and stories like that where I can just be like, literally what matters? What the heck matters more than these two? But I know that that's almost like kind of a guilt trippy way to look at things, but it doesn't feel like a guilt trip to me at all. It feels like a perspective shifter and like a reality.
No, I agree. I can be guilty, like a guilt trip. I say guilty like it's like a verb, but
it's like doesn't translate as a guilt trip in my brain. It translates as take a moment to actually think about what matters. And it grounds me. It brings me to this place of like, okay, there's like an exhale. There's peace. It's like none of this stuff like matters.
And you just made me think when you were saying that about Sunny being hungry. The other thing I think that a lot of parents run into, and I feel like this was a problem for me as a child was I think that grown-ups forget that kids are people. Do you know what I mean? Like, do you have a day where you ate dinner and then you're still hungry and you just walk to the fridge and get a snack? Do you have a day where you usually go to bed at 9:00, but you're not tired, so you just turn on a show or you grab your phone or you snuggle with your husband? Do you have a day where you made all these plans to go do something and now you're like, I don't want to do any of this. This is all awful. And you just flat out don't do those things. Like, your kids don't have the ability to just do things for themselves. They don't have the ability to say, Mom, I don't feel like running around today, so can we just stay home? No, you're going to make them get in the car and go. They don't have the ability to just get up and cook their own food. They don't have the ability to just get up and go turn on a show for most kids in the middle of the night when they can't sleep. So I think another thing that parents just run into is like, you probably weren't taught that children should have compassion as a child, because generationally, and I'm not just saying this as my parents, I'm just saying generationally. No,
we just needed to like respect and obey.
And I read a book and I loved this perspective was, so my parents are Gen X. My grandma's a boomer. Her grandma was born during the Great Depression, just for some history. My great grandma was taught. So my great grandma who birthed my grandma was taught, and I never talked to her about this, but their generation was taught that babies don't have personalities until they're 2. They're a blank slate and their soul is just thrust into them at 2. That was the popular parenting theme then. So like, you're basically training this animal between 0 and 2. Don't pick them up when they're crying. Don't spoil them. And then, you know, my grandma's generation, boomers, whose parents were born during the Great Depression, they removed a little bit of that generational trauma. And now their thing was, you are spoiling your kids if you pick them up, if you respond to their cries, if you touch them in the middle of the night. Don't breastfeed them because that's too much closeness. They'll start using you as a pacifier. And then my parents' generation removed a little bit of that boomer trauma, and it was a little bit more free-range parenting was popular in the 90s, but it was also kids don't deserve respect. You do what I say, and that's the end of it. And so it's so interesting to me that we all walk around when we say generational trauma, we're like actually saying all of us were parented this way. And the reason that continue to happen, and now it's not really happening very much anymore is because we live in the information age now, where every single one of us have literally the world of knowledge in a 5-inch phone, and we can break those cycles, which is great. But now I think we're all scrambling. How do we parent? How do I fix this generational trauma, completely get rid of it? Because we have the power to do that now, where I think the information wasn't there for our parents, but it is for us. So I think that is like, it's just so interesting to me to look at the history, and I don't know how.
And like, to give your, like, pending, I want to say this graciously, but like, barring abuse, I just genuinely feel like most parents are doing the best with what they have and what they know. And I don't want to say that if you've had like a super traumatic upbringing in a way to be like, give your parents some grace. Because I think that there is a time and a place for God's wrath and judgment. And, you know, that will come full circle if you were a victim to any of those like awful, horrible things. But I just feel like most of the time people really did the best with what they had and where they came from. I know that that's true. Like, my parents were like phenomenal parents, but when you think about where they came from, extra phenomenal parents. Like, it's just kind of crazy how much they even broke off in the battles they fought so that we wouldn't have to. And now it's like, we're faced with our own, and our mentors have always been so empowering over, like, you know, reminding us that like the battles that you choose to fight, your kids won't have to, you know? And so pick and choose those wisely, but know that it's going to feel like a battle because it is. You know, there's going to be like rewiring of brain patterns and behavioral changes and all this stuff that we have to like kind of nail down to this point where it's more natural. And sometimes that even feels like, you know, going through the motions enough to be like, I'm just going to do this until my feelings catch up, if that makes sense. You know, like kind of taming your feelings, telling them to take a little back seat. Because you know in your brain what is the best route, the best way to model things to your kids. Kind of like a fake it till you make it mindset sometimes.
No, and that is so good, because I think when we're talking about toddlers who don't have the brain power to actually regulate their emotions, they're depending on you to regulate their emotions for them. You have to, you're both going to be on autopilot, because the time to teach a lesson is not when the storm is happening, right? A kid just dropped his lollipop and now it's covered in dog hair, which is a regular occurrence in my house, not lollipop, but anything that drops on the floor. We have 2 giant dogs. My son hates dog hair. So it's a huge problem. Or whatever it is. They didn't get the green, I don't know, sticker. They got a red one. Whatever the thing is that seems so dumb to you, it's a really big deal to them. So I think respect that it's a really big deal to them.
Yeah.
But because I was, and I still am to this day, just rewiring the we don't hit kids who are crying, mentality. I did. I had, and that's why these like mantras are coming out of my mouth without me even thinking of them now. But it was like anytime Noah when he got old enough, boys are very physical. I think a lot of people will find that boys, and I'm the same way. So it's not all boys, it's just girls. Boys a lot of times need a physical outlet to anger, even at 2 years old. So they are the ones that hit more. They hit more than little girls do. They bite more than little girls do. Or they self-destruct more than little girls do. Whatever it is, they're just very physical beings. So like labeling your kid's emotion. I did this. I labeled Noah's emotion. I was thinking about it earlier. Like, when did I stop having to do that? And I would say he was nearly 4 when I had to stop saying, you're feeling really angry now. And I still have to do it sometimes. He's 5, but I still have to. Like, if he's having a really hard time, I can help him label those emotions. Wow, you are feeling so frustrated because Lily took that from you. Let's talk about it, or whatever it is. But when they're that little, and if you're getting hit, the words that would come out of my mouth, because it was just something that grounded me, grounded him. Oh, you are feeling so angry right now. It is okay to feel angry. It is not okay to hit. And if he did it again, I would repeat that, but then I would say, I'm going to hold your arms now to keep my body safe, because it is not okay to hit. Mm-hmm. And in those moments, we would both calm down. He ended up getting connection, which is usually what he was seeking, because I was hugging him, holding his arm down. I was hugging him. And then the time to teach the lesson is much later, 5-10 minutes later, when they've calmed down. And you can say, and I still do this to this day, if Noah has a hard time, we talk about something later. We process later. Let's talk about XYZ, whatever happened. And let's talk about some other ways we could have approached that. Yeah. And we still do that to this day, which I think that's the only way you can really, when you're talking about toddlers, when you're talking about preschoolers, they just don't. And if I'm having a hard time regulating my own emotions at 30 freaking years old, why am I expecting him to be able to do it? Yeah. I should not be holding an expectation on my 2, 3, 4, 5-year-old child that I can't even put on myself.
Yeah, I know. And that's something that like I've really always, I've talked to Chase about too. And just like some of my other friends that were raised in that kind of like more authoritarian mindset, is like my kind of motto is we always need to regulate before we instruct. So regulation before instruction, because if they are in their fight or flight brain, their literally thinking brain is not,
they cannot
online
use logic.
So it's actually just like so counterproductive. You will both just find yourself getting more and more angry, because what they need in that moment is to be regulated.
They need to borrow your calm.
That I think has always been what's so hard for me about the like cry it out kind of stuff. It's because your baby, and I've talked about this before, and I know this is kind of a side note, but your baby can get to a point in their crying cycles where they are 1,000% unable to self-soothe. Babies don't know how to self-soothe at all in general.
They just learn to ignore you.
When your baby gets to a point where they are hysterically crying and you are waiting and waiting and waiting, eventually they'll figure it out, I don't know why I just got into this tangent, but I just think about how we expect kids to know how to like self-regulate their emotions. So even like cry it out with babies, it's like they don't learn how to self-soothe. They literally pass out from crying a lot of times. Maybe they vomit, and their brain actually gets to a point where it's like, you know what? We got to go into survival mode. We've done everything we know how to get our food supply and our comfort and our nurture back towards us. They're not coming. So we better conserve our energy because we don't know how long it's going to be till they come back. We're going to shut off our brain. We're going to go to sleep.
Yeah.
They did not learn how to self-soothe.
No.
Okay. Now I'm going to take a breath. Those babies grow up and become toddlers, and not even just those babies, all babies grow up and become toddlers, and their brains are not much more mature. And on top of that, they're learning a million things every single day. They're all of this sensory input of like, how do I operate in this world, and what do I do, and what's right and what's wrong, and what does my mom need me to do, and what do my friends need me to do. And in the same breath, they're, you know, still dealing with these like old emotions. They're introducing new emotions. They're feeling things they've never felt before. And that's only going to maximize when they get to puberty. So I won't even go there. But like, if we don't learn the lesson, I guess is what I'm trying to say. If we don't learn the lesson in infancy, we're going to learn the lesson in toddlerhood. If we don't learn the lesson in toddlerhood, we're going to learn it in adolescence and in puberty and all of like the teenage years. If we don't learn it then, we missed out on a lifetime of potential connection with our child. And I just think that that is devastating.
It is.
Because in the midst of all the hard and the messy and the chaotic, there's a bid for connection. And when you can see past the emotion and the heightened superficial, all the stuff that they're showing, and dive into the root underneath the surface, things actually will make so much sense to you. You know, it's not about the cookie. It's usually not. It's usually not about the cookie they don't get before bedtime. Maybe it's about like the false promise, or maybe it's about, you know, I don't know. Like, I just feel like with Sunny, it gives me so much compassion and grace for her because I feel like I can really understand things from her perspective. Yeah.
Which is should be a goal as a parent.
If I slow down.
Yeah. These little babies, they have no say in anything that they do all day long. And I have that with Noah because one of the other things that we implemented when he was a toddler was giving him choices, because I realized like he just is vying for power. He just wants to have a say in his day.
Autonomy.
How would I feel if I didn't get to choose what I wore? I didn't get to choose what I was eating for breakfast, lunch, or dinner. I didn't get to choose what I was doing that day. Like when I was allowed to play with my toys, like that like hurts my heart to think about. So like if I want Noah to get upstairs to bed, we say, do you want to ride a race car? Do you want to drive an airplane? And then Brady does whatever he wants. If I need him to get into the car, I'm just trying to give him as much power as I physically can. And I still do this. I started when he was very, very young, when he could like voice his opinions. Do you want to wear blue socks or brown socks? Do you want to wear this really pretty neutral colored shirt that I love, or do you want to wear this really obnoxious red Spider-Man shirt? Like,
and if you're having a hard time with your child obeying you, I would say that could be the sole thing that you could implement that would literally change your life tomorrow. Don't say, hey, can you please go get your shoes on? First of all, like, okay, when you're saying something, you almost need to think like 10 steps ahead. Yeah. So if they don't respond to this, what am I going to say next? You know, have that stored up, because I feel like the mind games with toddlers and the going back and forth and the power struggles will really bode themselves into that pathway of like insecurity that I alluded to earlier, where it's like, well, who's in charge, you or me? You know, if you're like, please go put your shoes on, and they just like look at you or they disobey, and you're like, I said, please go get your shoes on. Then what's your, like, where's this headed? You know, where's your plan? So the choices are, hey, we're going to get in the car. You want to wear your pink sandals or your pink boots?
And they get a choice.
And they will answer the question, and they will go do it. I promise you. And if they don't, what I say is, I asked you a question. Do you want to wear these or do you want to wear these? If they still don't listen, you clearly aren't able to make that decision. I'm going to make it for you. Here's your pink shoes, and I'm going to carry you to the car. So you offer the freedom, and then you easily retract it if they aren't going to respect it. So it's like you almost are like, okay, here's your little, you know, here's your opportunity. And I just feel like the choices are such a game changer. But then like having in kind of like a boundary of like, okay, but if they don't listen, then we're going to be like, okay, I'm going to pick you up now. You know, our thing for a while was like in the grocery store, and it's like chaos, you know, with Sunny, like voicing expectations beforehand, like walking into a space of like another little like, I feel like I like think in the realm of so many different side tangents. So I'm so sorry. But I always say like set her up for success. That's what I tell Chase. That's what I tell my parents, anybody that's dealing with her. Let's set her up for success. So that means she processes things ahead of time before we go into Trader Joe's. Hey, this is what I'm expecting. You're allowed to have your own cart. I would love for you to have your own cart. The only things you're allowed to put on your own cart are things that you've seen me purchase before, or things that you ask me and I say okay to. So like she knows, oh, I can bring all the fruit that I want, all the veggies that I want. If there's things that we've bought before, they can go in the cart. Otherwise, you need to ask me about them. And then I will lay out if that is hard for you, or if something else happens, if you are not, if you're being crazy with your cart, if you're not listening to me, if you, whatever it is, then we're going to have to put your cart back, and then you can walk next to me. And then if that's still not working, like I go through, if we're still not doing that, you're going to have to sit in the cart. Yep. So there's these like steps of, like I'm going to start by giving you freedom. Yeah. And if you respect that freedom, like go for it, babe. Like I want you to have a good time. Yeah. If you're having a hard time, then I'm going to have to reel it in a little more at a time.
That is how you set a boundary. We do the exact same thing before we go in anywhere, especially with 2 kids, because I feel like I need his help a lot. But that is how you set a boundary with a child. It's not, I'm going to create this boundary in my head, and if you don't do it, I'm going to smack you.
Imaginary. Yeah.
Yes. You have to voice the boundary and slowly retract the freedom. That is what we mean when we say an authoritative parent. You are clearly telling them the boundary, what will happen, the consequence. And I don't care if you send me a giant long message about how I'm an awful parent because my child has consequences.
Goodness.
I know. I'd just delete it.
I just feel like you're failing your child if there are not consequences or discipline involved in their everyday life. Like, which we can get to that verse in scripture.
Yeah. We can absolutely. Let's just move on to what not to do with your child. Because I feel like Jesse and I'm up to 5. Jesse's almost up to 4. So we can tell you what to do with your children up to then. I have no idea what to do with a teenager. I am terrified of teenagers. I don't know what to do with an 8-year-old or a 6-year-old because I don't have one of those. But we can tell you these are the steps that we took with our children up to 3 and up to 4, almost 5. You know what I mean? Label the emotion. Give him space. Give him protection. Give him love in the emotion. Teach the lesson after the emotion. Set a boundary. Like beef in all these different scenarios.
And remaining strong and secure and consistent is one of the best ways you can love your child.
You have to be trustworthy. Your child has to be able to trust you. So if you say, I'm turning off this TV, if XYZ, I'm whatever it is, you have to do it. The same way if you say, hey, we're going to the zoo today, you've got to get up and take your kid to the zoo today, even if you don't feel like it.
Okay, and this is like, I think one of my biggest pet peeves of something that I have heard somebody say before is I would have more kids if they behaved like yours. And my thought process behind that is if your kids are behaving in a way that's making your life like extra difficult or it's making you get to the point where you don't want to have any more kids because they're not behaving in a way that's like conducive for that. My question would be like, don't start wishing your kids were somebody else's kids and don't start pretending like they have it easier than you do just because like maybe their kid is like a different kind of, no, it literally like it lies in the hands of a parent. And yes, our kids are like their own humans and they're going to make their own decisions and everybody's struggles are going to look different, but they're going to be there. But I just feel like it's the way that you handle it as a parent. And I see sometimes parents just like roll over in the face of like, I just have difficult kids, or they're just like too much. They're rambunctious. They're crazy. They don't listen, whatever it is. And I just think that is like such bogus. And if you followed me at all on my personal page, you've probably heard me harp on this like more than most things I've ever talked about. But speaking life over your child and speaking about them only in a way that God would and that you want them to reflect is so important. The parents that sit around and talk about how frustrating, annoying, obnoxious, whatever it is, deceptive, that they think their child is, they are only and ever going to become exactly what you speak over them. And it is so important to give them favorable judgment. So that means like, I guess in other words, the benefit of the doubt.
Giving them the benefit of the doubt.
So when you see a situation like maybe you walk in and your toddler just took a toy from your baby, you know, and instead of immediately interpreting that as like, oh, they're being mean. It's like, oh, they're having a hard time right now. Let's sit down and try to talk about, you know, what does that look like? And maybe they were just about to turn around and grab a different toy to give to your baby. You know, just like stepping back, taking breaths, honoring like the process that they have to go through, but then also speaking and shedding light in a way that's like, I'm going to call upon you in the highest light possible, the highest way possible, because that is how you nurture and grow a human being. smothering them with words of death over them is literally like, it just, talk about something that breaks your heart. Like, I cannot handle parents speaking in a way about their kid in front of them or about them or around them that is tearing them down. And maybe if they don't even know, like, their spirit, you know, like, I'm sorry, my 8-month-old can feel encouraged or deflated depending on the tone of voice and the way you're speaking about him and to him. How much more so for the 2-year-old, for the 3-year-old, 4-year-old, for the 15-year-old. The joke to your friend about your 15-year-old girl being X, Y, and Z, it's not funny.
Yeah. We are at 55 minutes if you want to talk about hitting our kids, because I refuse to call it spanking. We can say this is about spanking, but I refuse to call it spanking. It's hitting your kids. You're hitting your kids.
I'm gonna abbreviate this, and I would love if you guys wanted the entirety of this article. I can send it to you.
I also have a post. Let me find it.
There's a lot of research I've actually done on this topic, because you hear all the time that verse in Proverbs that says, whoever spares the rod hates their children, but the one who loves their children is careful to discipline them. And for as long as time has gone on, people have used this verse as an excuse to hit their kids or use objects or their hand or whatever to discipline their kids. And I think what's really interesting is I just had this feeling when I was pregnant with Sunny where I was like, I don't feel like that's what it actually means. And this is one of those things, when people are like, well, what made you decide X, Y, and Z? And it's some monumental, foundational, astronomically in-depth principle that you've spent a decade researching. And you're like, how in the world could I just come out with a simplified answer? Everything that I feel like I decided to do comes with this boatload of research and, dedication to the topic before I even come to understand it completely. So this is a tidbit and a snippet of that, but I will just read a couple paragraphs from this article. I like how they spoke on it. She said, his rod is the English translation of the derivative of the Hebrew word shebet, which depending on the context can mean tribe or tribes, scepter, spear, club, rod, staff, or correction. In the context of the verse, it's apparent that the word shebet means a rod, staff, and or a correction. But what were the rod and staff used for during that time period among the Israelites? Was it to hit their children for their wrongdoings? Actually, no. The rod and staff were multi-purpose instruments that could be used interchangeably as a walking stick, a crutch, a support, and for shepherds to guide their sheep, count their sheep, defend their sheep against predators, and pull them out of or steer them away from dangerous situations. It makes sense that the author of Proverbs would have used this word in its context because parents, as shepherds of their children, should guide and protect their children and steer them away from harm. We must also look at the Hebrew word musar, translated to the English discipline. Depending on the context, it could mean discipline, chastening, bond, instruction, or correction. In context with rod, meaning a shepherd's staff, it makes sense that musar likely means instruction or correction, because that is exactly what a shepherd's staff in the loving hands of a shepherd does for his sheep. And that is probably 2 paragraphs of 45 in this article. I'm not even exaggerating. But I just think it's really important to get back to the root and the original language of things. And more and beyond that, thinking about who Jesus is and all of the ways that he highly, highly, highly values children. In fact, tells us that we must become exactly like them to enter the kingdom. Tells us that it's better for you to have a millstone hung around your neck and thrown into the depths of the sea than to deceive them. Mm-hmm. He looks at children as the pinnacle of the human race, and that they are to be valued and upheld, and that they have something to teach us.
They have a million things to teach us, but yes.
So what does that mean? If you just look at the whole context of the Bible and scripture and what we know to be true about Christ, why on earth would he tell you to turn around and go physically hurt your child in a way that I could literally never picture Jesus himself doing? That's the other thing that I think has always gotten me. I have this picture of Jesus hanging in our living room, and he's in like a circle dancing with children. And I bought it because I'm like, it's how I've always pictured him to be. The thought of him like physically harming any of us, actually even just saying that out loud, like that actually would throw so many like biblical truths upside down.
Yeah.
You know,
what would Jesus do? He would not be hitting our children.
And like, okay, even like outside of scripture, in what other context would it be okay for me to hit someone when I'm mad at them? Can I hit you right now if you make me mad?
Well, and
can I go home and hit my husband? Can I hit my dog?
Why
are none of those? Why are all of those abuse?
Why can you expect your kid to not hit when you have literally only taught them that when we're mad we hit? You can't get mad at them for hitting you or for being a bully when they're in school. There's a account I really liked they have a whole series on spanking. It's Flourishing Homes and Families on Instagram, and she talks a lot about. I have
all of those saved on my Instagram.
It's freaking gold. She talks a lot about what you did. Is spanking biblical? And she like goes through the rod. She also has this post which got me because I see through things. I see things through a lens of a child who was sexually abused, and I forever will see that, and that's just a burden that I will always have to carry. She goes through and it. Okay, let me just read it. She says, there is not a single verse in all of scripture that describes or alludes to hitting a small child or a person of any age on the butt. She talks about how in the Bible, if someone is struck in the Bible, they're struck on the back. And then she goes into, and I don't even need to look at it because I just know it so well. She goes into how spanking on the butt was a pagan, the first time it's ever written about in history, it was a pagan practice, and it was for conceiving, for fertility, because when you are spanking someone on the butt, and think about it, when they breed cows, when they breed horses, you're smacking them on the buttocks before you inseminate, because what that does is it makes the genitals red and swollen, and it gives pressure and sensation to the nerves that are for sexual arousal. So that is where spanking on the butt started. It's a sexual thing. That's why so many people do it in sex. So she went on to share all of these stories of people who grow up and have body trauma of sexual abuse who have never been sexually abused. And it is because they were spanked as a child. And you are giving your kids sexual arousal when you're spanking them. Maybe not at 2, maybe not at 3, but when they're like 8, 9, 10, as they grow up farther and farther, you're going to give them all of these. She talks about giving them these confusing feelings of pain and punishment and sex, and why we wonder why we have such a problem with like abuse and porn. Do you know what I mean? And it just like made so much sense to me. It made so much sense to me because I can tie the feelings of shame that I had when I was being abused to the feelings of shame that I had when I was being spanked as a child. Here's this person that loves me. Right. This is the human being who protects me, who loves me, who feeds me, but they also hit me in my genitals because you're bending your kid over your leg or even their butt. That is their private area. That is their genitals. They're touching me and hitting me in my genitals. Why is it not okay when somebody else, Uncle Steve in the basement is sexually abusing me? You are sending so many mixed messages. Yeah. And I love that post. And she has, if you go onto her page, she has a whole thread of people sending her messages of, yes, I experienced this. I experienced that like so shameful arousal when my dad was hitting me. And now I have body trauma of being sexually abused when I was never physically sexually abused.
Wow. That is heavy.
There are just so many repercussions of hitting and spanking your children.
Well, also like the Christians that spank and they're like, okay, I'm not supposed to do this when I'm angry.
Oh,
like I guess that's like one of the rules.
That kills me even more.
But I'm like,
that's more confusing.
But also like, I'm sorry, that's the only time in which you would probably be wanting to do that.
And even if you're so angry on the inside, you're hitting your kid out of anger and you're putting on this mask of no anger, that is just also setting them up to be a victim of sexual abuse.
But I also like, okay, I'm sorry, I know this is going long, but like there were a few like quotes that I wanted to read because I just feel like, okay, this is a quote. These are all about like discipline. They're quotes about discipline. Discipline is helping a child solve a problem. Punishment is making a child suffer for having a problem. To raise problem solvers, focus on solutions rather than retribution.
Also, that can be screaming and yelling, not just, you can do even more damage by yelling at your kids all the time.
Oh, absolutely. But like when we get back to the point of like, okay, if discipline is instruction, then hitting or screaming at your kid is literally just getting them to be afraid of you so that they don't question a single thing that you say, to make your life easier, so that they're like, okay, I'll just do this. But they're not actually, they don't know why they're doing X, Y, and Z. So a lot of these times what I see with these kind of kids is they grow up, and because they were taught to fear their parents or their caregivers because of like the hitting or the screaming, they just said yes and amen to whatever their parents said. I will do this. I will do this. I will do this. They leave. They have so much resentment because they never actually learned.
They don't have an internal compass. They have an external compass. The Danish way of parenting talks about that. Children who are hit, screamed at, yelled, did things out of fear, they never learned to internally make a good choice. They learned to just not piss their parents off. That's all that.
And I feel like that's what like breeds its way to a lot of different rebellion and like issues 100%. With experimenting with things that they shouldn't. And this is another one. If your children fear you, they cannot trust you. And if they cannot trust you, they cannot learn from you. And this one says, it's always hardest to remember to acknowledge a child in the heat of a difficult moment. But if a child can hear anything during a temper tantrum, it reassures him to hear our recognition of his point of view. He still resists, cries, and complains, but at the end of the day, he knows we are with him, always in his corner. After these first few years, this will define our relationship for many years to come. So she was talking about like being with your kid. When setting a limit, it's most helpful for kids to hear what they can do rather than what they can't do. It actually takes us longer to process negative statements than positive ones. If we want our kids to understand us, it's best to tell them what we'd like them to do rather than telling them what not to do. That would be like, please use a quiet voice rather than stop yelling. Which is kind of off topic, but somewhat on topic. It's just like kind of going back to what we said earlier, just instruction. So don't just like walk around being like, don't do this, stop doing this, stop doing this. It's like, hey, you right now, you can't jump on the couch because your brother's asleep on the couch, but you know what? You could go jump on your trampoline. It's in the front room. You know, you could go jump off the stairs. So giving them those like alternative. Oh, I have so many things that I could talk about with this topic, but I guess what I would say is if you feel like you've been kind of pushed into a direction of discipline that has never really felt right with you, or you feel shamed for the way that you choose to punish your kids or discipline. I don't even like the word punish. It like discipline your kids. Truly just like sit with yourself and like actually ask yourself what you have peace about, and nothing else matters.
Yeah.
Nothing else matters. It doesn't even matter what we're saying right now.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter what your friends are saying. Doesn't matter what the book says. You know, like sit with yourself and actually ask yourself. And if you're a Christian, ask yourself what would sound so cheesy.
WWJD.
Those bracelets. Genuinely.
What would
if Jesus was sitting in the same room as you right now, would he be sitting in the corner like, yeah, show him who's boss, smack him? Or would he be on his knees and reminding us that it's always been about.
Well, and the thing that I think of when parents are hitting, because they were never taught their emotions. They were never taught how to regulate them. They were never taught what to do when you have so much cortisol in your body is in fight or flight and you need to run. Usually you're not hitting out of anger, you're hitting out of fear. If we're going back to what I said at the beginning.
Yeah, they feel out of control. Maybe.
They feel out of control. This is the way that they can feel in control. It's not your fault. If that's you listening to this right now and you're doing this and every time you're done you regret it, you feel awful, you feel ick about it, I would just encourage you to just do the thing that I said at the beginning, like figure out your triggers and just get curious about them and figure out how to reparent that little kid in you that is terrified because it's bedtime and your kid's not going to bed and that little kid thinks it's going to get hit. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Reparent that little kid inside of you. It sounds so corny, but that is literally what you need to do. Yeah. So that you can control your own
I
anger.
think that's right. Because I think if you ask yourself in those moments that you're getting really mad, like, why am I getting mad right now? Yeah. And I've noticed with Sunny, I feel that way when she's not sitting still in church.
Yeah.
And I'm like, why?
Yeah.
Okay, because I was raised Catholic and I needed to sit in this pew.
Mm-hmm.
And first of all, I needed to wear my Sunday best, because if not, like, you're not necessarily welcome there.
Mm-hmm.
There's a dress code. You need to sit still. You need to stand up and kneel and pray and say all the right things and do all the right things. And if you don't, you are in trouble.
Mm-hmm.
Not even necessarily by your parents, but even like maybe the priest or the people sitting behind you. Like, it was very much a communal effort of like, sit down, shush, listen, pay attention. And so when I see my daughter not doing that in church, even though it's a completely different vibe, I have this tension rising up in me of like, stop, you need to sit down, you need to, and I'm like,
where's
but
that
why?
from?
Literally, why?
Get
She's just sitting on the ground playing with her cards, So I don't know. It's good to like get back to those roots and then just like remind yourself, okay, this isn't then, this is now. We can make it a different way. And just like, oh my gosh, they're just kids. And if someone else in your life needs to hear that, tell them too. Sorry, she's 3. Yeah. We're figuring it out. I'm sure you did the same thing when you were 3, just like give them grace on their behalf, instead of like, don't let them catch you speaking about them in a way that's like, oh, I just don't know what to do. They're just crazy. Sorry. They're just this. They're just can't sit still, can't listen, try to just like, correct, teach, raise your kid in the way that they should go, and they will not depart.
Okay. That's it for today, you guys.
Sorry, I hope that was good enough.
We should probably do a Q&A on this. So do you want to do that next time?
Yeah, we probably should.
Let's have you guys, I'll hop on. I haven't been on social media very much, so I apologize that we're not super active. I post as much as I have the capacity to. But I will get on and post a story box, which next week is 4th of July. What day are we recording? Are we recording next week?
Well, Thursday is 4th of July.
Do you want to record Wednesday?
We'll probably have to do something like that.
Okay, because I just want to let them know if we're releasing an episode. But I will post a Q&A box. You can send us your specific examples. You can send us your opinions. You can tell us we're awful and everything's wrong, and we'll talk about that too. So
tell us all
the things.
Sure you will. Yeah, we can do Wednesday.
That's fine. Perfect. All right, we will see you guys next week.